Mr Wood, if I can go to you first, I mean, you would well remember the coronial inquest in 2013, Comcare versus Airservices in Australia, 2016.
Yes, I do, Senator.
So arising out of all of that terrible incident, a number of recommendations were made by Coroner Greg Kavanagh. Can you confirm that they've all been implemented?
They are all except for the lighting upgrade on the large vehicles, which is due to be completed in the next couple of months.
So are all Mk8 Mark 8 vehicles now allowed to turn out with lights and sirens on public roads on any emergency aircraft or otherwise?
No, they're not,
in
Senator.
Every state and territory?
So, sorry, Senator, just say that again.
Are the Mark 8 vehicles now allowed to turn out with lights and sirens now on public roads to any emergencies, aircraft or otherwise, in every state and territory?
They are able to respond to aircraft emergencies, Senator, under lights and sirens, but not to any other emergency, and we'll be assessing that once the lighting upgrade is complete to determine what level of return to lights and sirens we intend to go to.
But wasn't that the problem, that they didn't have the lights and sirens on when they were operating on a public road?
It was part of the problem, Senator. There were a number of things, from the visibility of the vehicle to the positioning of the seating of the officer inside the vehicle to the lighting upgrade. Okay. And through risk work from then, Senator, we determined that in the unlikely event of an aircraft emergency off airport, that we would continue to respond under lights and sirens in those conditions, but not under any other conditions, Senator.
Have you reviewed paint and markings upgrade and they've been applied to the entire Mk8 fleet?
Sorry, Senator, I just can't quite hear.
Have you reviewed paint and markings upgrade and applied it to the entire Mk8 fleet?
Yes, we have, Senator, in the sense that new livery has been put on the vehicle since the coronial inquest. It's a more plain type of look with some bold lettering on the side, which, based on the research we'd undertaken, was the best type of livery to use, so it was the most visible, if that makes sense.
So has the emergency lighting packages been applied to the entire fleet?
To all the Mark 8 and Mark 9 vehicles, yes, Senator.
But not to the entire fleet?
Well, there are 4 domestic response vehicles which are getting their lighting upgraded as well. 2 have been done and 2 will be done fairly soon.
Is this acceptable, 7.5 years after the unfortunate event?
Well, we would have liked to have done it sooner, Senator, but that's just the state of play, and we've done it as fast as we can, and we have the restrictions in place along the way. And as I said, we'll be reviewing that.
What would be the impediments to achieving it in its entirety in a reasonable time frame?
Sorry, Senator, I just can't quite hear.
What would have been the impediments to achieving the recommendations in their entirety in a reasonable time frame? And 7.5 years is a fairly long time frame.
It is a long time, Senator. It was not as a simpler upgrade as what we thought it would have been, and there were a number of project challenges, and yes, it has taken longer than it should have done, but we are almost there, Senator.
So is there any specific reason that it's taken so long?
I don't know the specific reason, Senator. I think there are a number along the journey, and it's something that we've learnt from, and should these things come up again, we'll certainly be looking at doing those things in a faster way than before.
But you can't point to any lack of resources, lack of finance. What was it, just the lack of will that took it 7.5 years?
Well, it's certainly not a lack of finance, Senator. In terms of how the project was managed, I think there were some learnings from that. I can't give you specific examples as to why, but we could certainly look into that if that's what you'd like us to do.
Have siren upgrades been applied to the entire fleet?
Siren upgrades were not required, Senator, so we engaged an organisation, I can't recall who, I'd have to take that on notice, to test the sirens, and our sirens were in the appropriate limits for whatever emergency vehicle sirens need to be, Senator.
So you're not upgrading the sirens?
No, there was no requirement to upgrade the sirens, Senator.
Is it not true that none of the witnesses interviewed in the coroner's report reported hearing the sirens, despite them being active?
I'd have to take it some time ago now, Senator. I'd have to take that on notice, but we did engage to have the sirens tested, and as I said, the sirens were deemed to be in the appropriate limits for emergency vehicle sirens.
Have all the ARFS emergency vehicle drivers completed the relevant training at Mount Cotton?
As far as I know, Senator, yes. Or some completed it at a different location. It was not all at Mount Cotton. There was, of course, also a duplicate course that was run in the West, and our new recruits are doing that similar course, as I understand it, at Avalon Airport.
How often do firefighters complete the training?
That particular training was a once-off, Senator, and there's a strategy at the moment to have a look at going forward, what that will look like in terms of perhaps simulation may be part of the future, or continue on with another practical course such as that one.
How often have your emergency vehicle driving instructors completed this training?
Oh, I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Do you think that's appropriate, that, basically a really unfortunate incident resulted some productive outcomes in respect to proactive training, and that Airservices have completed one lot of training in 7.5 years, and that's the end of the matter? Is that enough training?
So, Senator, it's not one lot of training. There are two components to it. So every 90 days, all staff are required to do components of that training by taking a vehicle off airport and driving under traffic conditions.
Do you still have this arrangement where, your vehicles and your firefighters are able to interchange off airport on the public road with metropolitan or rural fire services?
Interchange, Senator? Can
they get called out of the airport?
So we do, Senator, from time to time.
But
yes,
you've trained them once?
Yes, but we don't respond under emergency response conditions to mutual aid, Senator.
Okay. So
there are restrictions in place, very careful restrictions, that will be reviewed once the lighting upgrade is finished.
Do all new ARFS recruits undertake advanced driver training at Mount Cotton or similar?
As far as I understand, Senator, they do that at Avalon.
So the new recruits do advanced driver training?
As far as I understand, Senator, I will have to take the detail on notice.
Okay. So your evidence is basically you think it's at Avalon, not Mount Cotton?
For the latest recruit courses, Senator, and again, as to how many, I'll have to take that on notice, but before that, once a certain number of recruits, there was a group, then they were trained at Mount Cotton.
Does Avalon Airport have a dedicated driver training facility?
Again, Senator, I'll need to take that on notice, but it was
surely,
deemed...
Mr Woods, you would know that. You're the Chief Fire Officer.
No, Senator, I'm not in charge of training, but it was deemed appropriate to conduct that training, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it, Senator.
Well, the information I have is they don't have a dedicated driver training facility at Avalon.
Well, I'm sure the facility that they're using is appropriate to deliver the training. I'm not so sure it needs to be a dedicated driver training, but then again, I'm not expert in that area, but I can certainly take that on notice.
So is there a cost implication between Mount Cotton and Avalon? Are you training them at a different facility because it's cheaper?
Again, I'd need to take the cost difference and the reasons why, Senator.
Who makes that decision? Not you?
No, that would be training, Senator, where training is in a different area and they're in charge of the emergency driver training.
Okay.
And
so
I expect
who do they report to? You?
Sorry?
Do they report to you?
Training doesn't know, Senator.
Who do they report to?
It reports through to people capability, through the Executive General Manager.
And we haven't got that person here. What about the Chief?
Yes, yes.
They don't eventually get to you or through you.
No.
It's completely independent of you.
Yes.
Are you briefed on what... well, two questions, sorry.
Yeah.
A, do you have input into the architecture of training as the Chief Fire Officer, or do they consult you as the Chief Fire Officer? Not on everything, and/or do you have any role of approval over a training module or an element of a training module?
So my area, Senator, we set operational standards, and yes, I was briefed on the driver training and the move to deliver it at Avalon, but in terms of the makeup of that particular course, no.
That's all right.
So, Mr Logan, are you able to shed or take on notice if there is what are the respective costs for training at Mount Cotton and the respective costs for training at Avalon?
I'd need to take that on notice.
Well, please take it on notice, and I want to know whether it's an apple and an apple or it's basically the training at Mount Cotton is advanced driver training and the training at Avalon is not.
Yes, sir.
Is there any cost savings been made at training new recruits at Avalon in a more general sense and not in dedicated facilities? I'd like you to take that on notice.
Yes, sir.
Do you think Airservices, Mr Wood, has done all it can to prevent a repeat repeat of the tragic incident that occurred in Darwin in 2011?
I think, Senator, with anything like that, there's perhaps always you could do more, but we've certainly done very well, and we continue to monitor what we do and review our operating procedures to ensure that, to the best we can, that a tragic event like that would never happen again.
Would you be able to detail any public awareness campaigns you've conducted specifically to ensure the public are aware of the types of emergency vehicles you operate, specifically MK8s, as per recommendations by the coroner, and your own undertakings to Justice White? I fly a fair bit, and I've never seen any campaign like that. Have you actually?
Yes, we have, Senator. I'd need to take the detail on notice, but there's a campaign there to ensure that our locations attend a number of public events each year. So in other words, we get out and about so people can see who we are and what we do, and we'll have plenty of evidence of those sorts of events,
Okay,
Senator.
well, you can provide that on notice, that'd be very fine. Now, Mr Wood, you're aware of CASA MOS 139H?
Yes, Senator.
Requires certain equipment to be online and being available for use by ARFFS
Yes, Senator.
to be at the required category. So it's not a maybe, that's a must, isn't it?
Well, it is, Senator, but it's not linked to category. But yes, there are requirements to have certain equipment available, Senator, yes.
So is ARFFS currently fully compliant with MOS?
No, we do not have a rescue saw as described by the Manual of Standards online at the moment, Senator.
Interesting. So why wouldn't you have why wouldn't your vehicles be equipped with a power saw?
Because we've looked at that piece of equipment, Senator. It's a simply piece of equipment that's out of date and not fit for purpose, and it presents a significant safety hazard to our people. We've decided that based on that, we will remove it from service. And in making that decision, Senator, we had a look at our past history, and we cannot see when we've ever used that piece of equipment. It's simply been outdated. We've looked at incidents around the world in the last 15 years, and that type of power saw has not been used. We have later generation, as you would know, as Jaws of Life and that sort of equipment that can do some of that work. It is not a rescue saw, we know that. And we've also got arrangements in place with the local fire service to bring their rescue saw. And in terms of moving forward, Senator, we've completed some research. There is more modern kit available. We've completed a concept of operations, and I expect we'll be approaching market in the next few weeks, and the safety regulator is aware of the removal of that piece of equipment because of the safety risk it presents to our staff.
Okay. Is there a requirement for them to be equipped with power saws currently under that MOS?
For us, Senator, yes, there is.
But you decided not to do it.
For the safety of our staff, yes, Senator.
How long have you not been equipped with the power saws?
Late last year, but I'd need to take the date on notice, Senator.
How are firefighters expected to force entry into an aircraft fuselage, locked structures or vehicles involved in accidents if they are required to effect rescue and save lives? If they don't have the equipment that's under the thing? You're saying the Metropolitan might have a saw?
Not only, Senator. So, as I said, that piece of equipment is simply an out-of-date piece of equipment for its intended use. And even ICAO states, Senator, that more modern equipment may be available. We have more modern equipment, as in that absolute latest generation, as you would know, Jaws of Life cutting and spreading equipment. That equipment can be used to perform those functions. It is, yes, it doesn't perform all the functions as well. A power saw has certain functions, but it just presents a significant safety risk to our people, and we've decided to remove it from service.
And, so you've just advised CASA that you're just not going to comply because it's not safe. Is that what you're saying?
We've advised CASA that for the safety of our staff, we've removed it, and in doing that, we have work underway to look at an alternative solution that is more fit for purpose and in line with what we need it to be used for.
What about ladders? Is it true that your authority, that under your authority, no aviation firefighter is currently allowed to train with ladders over 2 metres?
That's correct, Senator.
I don't want to laugh, but I mean, I got this vision of, firefighters going up ladders that are about 30 metres high, not 2 metres.
Yeah, well, we take the safety of our people very seriously, Senator, and there is a risk of fall from a ladder, and we've examined that issue, and we've determined that at this time we will restrict our firefighters from climbing up ladders greater than 2 metres so they can still practice the necessary skills while we form a working group to look at an improved way going forward, and whether that improved way includes harness systems and the like.
So no aviation firefighters are currently under your own training policies working with ladders?
No, they can work with ladders, Senator. They just can't climb ladders in that sense above 2 metres. So we've introduced portable stairs and the like.
You need to,
So you believe...
seriously, you need to start that answer again.
Sorry, let's...
They can work with ladders, they just can't climb up them.
No, they can practice the skills up to 2 metres high, Senator. You may laugh, but it's a serious thing.
Okay, so you believe it's too dangerous to use a ladder in controlled training environment, but it's okay to use them in a fire or to conduct a rescue?
So let's put this into perspective, Senator. In our business, for every 100 times we use a ladder, we likely use it in training 99 times out of those 100. So this significantly reduces the risk from a fall from height from a ladder. We have restrictions in place for operational use, where the ladders can no longer be used as a work platform. They can be simply used at an entry and exit point from a different height.
So you can use it in a real situation, but you can't train with it? Is that correct?
Ladders are still a piece of equipment that fire brigades around the world use, Senator. We're just stepping forward and no longer accepting previous and existing practice, and we'll continue to challenge that. We've determined that the fall from height potential is there, so we've put some restrictions in place in the training space.
How many passenger aircraft have exits that are less than 2 metres
Just
high?
hold on, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
But you know, no, but seriously, the question or the observation before that the movies where the fire truck ladders go up like
Yes.
10 stories, and firemen that have got more gear on them than a miner, got dicks and picks and hats and crap, they scurry up them. That's okay.
No, workplace health and safety requirements are changing all the time, Senator, the safe systems of work.
So are you telling me that if I'm staying in a hotel over one floor in my city now, so when I'm trying to be serious about this, but now it's getting more serious because I'm frightened of fire. If I'm up on the 4th floor, there's no way they're coming to save me. Is that right?
That's not right, Senator.
So the fireman in the Brisbane Fire Brigade,
Yes.
he's coming up a ladder 4 or 5 or 6 stories to get me.
Correct.
Well, thank Christ for that.
Yes.
However, if I'm in the back of a Boeing that's more than 6 feet off the ground, ain't no ladders coming up.
Incorrect, Senator. So
Right,
operational
well, clear
use.
us up because
They just can't train on the ladder.
Yeah, but that's crazy.
They
No,
can
no, no.
train, Senator,
No,
they
that's
can train-
crazy.
No, it's
They
not,
can
Senator.
train on the ladder, but they're restricted to going no higher than 2 metres. On the ladder. So they on the ladder on training on the scenario
Yeah, but
that they're doing. So they're still getting up.
You talk about you talk about making a safe environment to work.
Absolutely,
You go, well,
Senator.
listen, you can't go over this side unless there's flames and planes blowing up around you and you've got shit in your nappy. You can then go above 2 metres. Why can't you set up a training environment where they're harnessed to the roof and could go up as high as they like, and if they fall, it's like one of those theme parks or
So,
something.
Senator, if you allow me to explain, that's exactly what we're looking at, and while we look into that, we've decided to
Well,
prevent
you should
training.
share
above
that
2
stuff
metres.
earlier with us
Well,
before we
I'm
get
trying
excited,
to explain
Mr.
it.
Wood.
Well,
No, you didn't. You had 5
okay.
or 10, and you had people rolling around the floor around you. You
Okay.
could have give us a crack on that a minute ago.
But in all seriousness, to go to the Chair's point, how many aircraft exits are less than 2 metres high? Because if you get a 380,
Correct.
you're not looking at 2 metres off the ground. That's
Correct.
not even the first floor's off 2 metres off the ground.
And our staff will still use ladders in an operational context, Senator.
Okay, but they just can't train on them.
They can train on them, Senator, because there's basically 4 skills to a ladder: getting on it, getting off it, going up it, and coming down it. And you can practice those skills up to 2 metres. So it's a temporary measure while we do some work to look at a safer system, particularly in the training area for our staff.
I've
to
got a
prevent fall
series
from
of
height.
questions, as you might have gathered by now. So what steps have you taken to provide no pun intended. What steps have you taken to provide alternate means for which firefighters can safely use to access elevated work platforms as a means of fighting fires or effecting rescue and saving lives?
So there's a number of measures we've put in place, Senator. So firstly, we've just purchased our first air-stair vehicle, which is a type of vehicle that will assist our firefighters to get into aircraft instead of using a ladder. Secondly, at all our locations, Senator, we've done a lot of work around with the airports to make sure that portable stairs are available. And we just had experience of this last week in Cairns, where there's an aircraft evacuation and the portable stairs turned up and everything worked as it should. So there is work underway, Senator.
We don't want to... Well, we're getting through this quite quickly, even though it is amazing to most of us. What about hoses? Would it be fair to say a fire hose is one of the most important tools of a firefighter?
Absolutely, Senator.
Okay. Is it true you exempted the whole ARFFS under your own authority from complying with Australian standards on fire hose testing?
No, it's not, Senator.
Ah.
It sounds like Senator Gallagher's got a mole, Mr Wood.
Is it true that you attempted to exempt ARFFS from this requirement?
No, it's actually the opposite, Senator. So we identified that we were not complying with the Australian standard for hose testing, so we put out a directive for all locations to move to that standard as quickly as we can. Okay. It's important that we do test our hoses, Senator, to a standard. It's just not the Australian standard test pressure.
Do you possess the authority to exempt yourselves and your government organisation from compliance with an Australian standard?
Sorry, Senator?
Do you possess the authority to exempt yourself and your government organisation from compliance with an Australian standard?
No, we'd need to seek exemption from the safety regulators.
You can't do it of your own volition?
Unless there was an immediate safety issue that we saw, Senator. So we did put measures in place to get our hoses tested as...
Senator, no, we can't, Senator.
Yeah. Okay. And CASA, MOS and regulations require ARFFS to comply with Australian standards for equipment?
They do. It does, Senator, yes.
By non-compliance, are you therefore also non-compliant? If you're by non-compliance with Australian standards, are you therefore non-compliant with CASA regulations?
We are non-compliant with that regulation, Senator. We've notified the safety regulator that we've identified a deficiency and non-compliance, and we're moving to meet the Australian standards, Senator.
Okay. If I could move to the domestic response vehicle. Would it be fair to say, Mr Wood, that Sydney Airport is by far the busiest ARFFS station in Australia with over 40 million passengers a year? Is that correct?
It's certainly the busiest in the number of responses that we attend to, Senator, yes.
So we'd have 40 million passengers?
Oh, I'm not sure on the passenger number, Senator, but it's the busiest in terms of the amount of responses that our people...
So would you have a recollection or any evidence of how many emergencies a year do Sydney ARFFS turn out to?
I'd have to take it on notice, Senator. We have 7,000 nationally and Sydney has a fair chunk of those.
Would it be correct to say they have 2,000 incidents a year?
Sounds about right, Senator.
Do they turn out 5 to 6 times a day?
Yeah, that sounds about right. On a busy day, yes, Senator, I think.
How long has the busiest fire vehicle in your fleet operating on the busiest roads in the nation been unable to operate lights and sirens as an emergency vehicle?
How old is the vehicle, Senator?
How long has the busiest fire vehicle in your fleet operating on the busiest roads in the nation been unable to operate lights and sirens as an emergency vehicle?
So that relates to the domestic response vehicle in Sydney, Senator. We've found that in terms of compliance with the New South Wales road rules, there's an issue there. We're just seeking some clarification from our legal area on, and we've put a restriction in place while that's been sought. That matter has now been worked through, and I expect fairly soon we'll be able to lift that restriction.
So if this all ties back to that terrible incident in 2011, here we are in 2019, turning a domestic response vehicle out that's unable to operate lights and sirens as an emergency vehicle. Is that your evidence?
That's correct, Senator, and it's exactly why we do these things. We continue to look at the rules on which we operate. We found that the legislation in New South Wales perhaps didn't cover us for first aid response, so we've put that restriction in place. We're pretty well through that matter now, and we expect to lift that restriction in the next few weeks.
Did you at any time think that that posed a significant risk to your firefighters, to the general public?
So, Senator, what our staff can do, and as the local managers in there, is to put a focus on responding airside to those emergencies when we generally go to first aid, while we're not able to use lights and sirens, Senator. It's just a precautionary measure.
Do you believe that this is acceptable?
Sorry, Senator?
Do you believe it's acceptable?
It's necessary, Senator. We found on legal advice that we may be not compliant, or we didn't have the authority to operate under lights and sirens, Senator, with respect to first aid, so we've put this precautionary restriction in place.
So, has this limitation put any lives at risk in terms of being unable to respond to the emergency incidents with lights and sirens?
No, Senator, because the focus in Sydney has been to respond airside where they may have gone landside. Okay. In other words...
Senator Brockman.
Just one quick question for ASA on behalf of some of my Tasmanian colleagues. Obviously, there's been an ongoing issue with the Hobart flight paths. Now, I'm fully aware, and the rest of the committee is fully aware of everything that's on the record. Just, is there anything, basically, any update you can give us on any new information into the process, any new consultation that's happened that the committee wouldn't already be aware of on that issue?
Senator, we released a design of the flight path out for consultation prior to Christmas, and that consultation has and is occurring, and we're now assessing that consultation, where we expect to come out with a decision by the end of March along the timelines that we've already published. Just to give you an idea of the work we're going through, in that consultation we received 277 submissions from around Tasmania, around Hobart, and 503 requests for further information. So we're working through all that to then publish the final design after that consultation.
Okay. That's all I wanted. Thank you,
Senator
Chair.
Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. So just returning to the hose situation. National dispensation from having to have its operational low-flat hose tested by a recognised external provider. Are you familiar with that, Paul?
Yes, I am, Senator.
What, apart from the mention of PFAS and others, what can you explain in layman's term what that was all about?
That's when you can have a dispensation for meeting a particular standard, Senator, and that particular exemption there to dispensation was not published. So in other words, it didn't come into effect.
But what were you seeking?
What we were seeking there, Senator, is while we're moving to meet the new Australian standard hose test pressure, we found that at some of our remote locations it's fairly difficult, so we were seeking to go about it a different way by purchasing testing equipment, and in the meantime just to put a hold on testing the hoses the way we described while we could purchase that test equipment.
I'm not sure Senator McCarthy would describe Darwin and Alice Springs as remote.
Ayers Rock and Alice Springs, actually, Senator, with the places. It's just not that easy to get hoses tested to the new standard.
A new sort of dispensation.
We were going to move with that dispensation, Senator. I think those fire stations did initially, although it was never published, but I've redirected since then. We thought we'd be able to move to buy that test equipment quickly. It hasn't worked out that way. It's quite difficult. So I've directed all locations to continue to move to meet the Australian standard with the hoses while we do some more work to see whether or not we can test in-house with test equipment, or we've got to externally source it, Senator.
Okay. So delaying the need to replace hoses that fail in Darwin and Townsville will reduce the number of PFAS contaminated hoses that need to be managed as they transition away from AFF to Solberg RF6 in the coming months. What's all that about?
I'm not aware of that, Senator, but I can make it very clear that we are transitioning our foam at Townsville and Darwin, and all facilities, infrastructure and the like will be reviewed with equipment replaced to ensure that when that new foam comes in, the foam we use everywhere else will be in effect, Senator.
What's the date of that?
End of June, Senator, I think is the plan.
Yeah, June. The phase out in June in Darwin and Townsville.
Okay. And finally, Mr Harfield, how are we going with those projects where you were costing the fitting out of a water closet at $4,000? Are those figures been revised up or down?
Senator, that's the information that we provided back to the Public Works Committee last year, and as you're aware, at that session that came down to, I think it was off the top of my head, but the record will speak, about $1,500.
Okay. So I well remember Mr Wallace's contribution where he said he could go to Bunnings and buy the pan and the lid for $200, and if the plumber charged him, $400 to fit it, he'd probably have an argument. So you've come down from $4,000 to $1,500. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it is less than the 4,000 because the way that the Qantas surveyor put risk into each one of the line items rather than actually risk up the entire project.
No.
So we went.
So there was a quantity surveyor in was this part of a bigger project?
Yeah, it was a part of a refurbishment of their air traffic control centre, and so therefore
Okay.
the line items, and then
I just said that that's fine. Just had this image of just
it's not
one crapper, one surveyor. Just said it'd be just something that'd top off my 6 years here.